Welcome to the 6 Miles to Supper podcast. I'm your host, Kayla Cox, and I've lost over 80 pounds with intermittent fasting 6 days a week, eating whatever I wanted at my meals, taking a cheat day every Sunday, and walking 6 miles a day. And I'm here to help you on your weight loss journey. In today's episode, we're going to talk about getting started with intermittent fasting. I thought it might be helpful to kind of go back to the basics because intermittent fasting is one of those things that it's so simple that it can lead to people wanting to overcomplicate it. And the thing is, when you make things overly complicated, that can be the thing that leads it to fail, actually. So in my experience, it's much better to keep intermittent fasting very, very simple and try to make it as easy as possible. The temptation a lot of times is to, instead of just doing intermittent fasting, it's, well, I'm going to do intermittent fasting and I'm also going to do keto during my eating window. And I'm also going to count calories and I'm going to do this. And all of that leads to making it so there's so many variables that it can then be very difficult if things aren't going well to kind of pinpoint what's going wrong. And that was kind of the tendency I had before when I struggled with my weight. I was always trying to combine things and make things really complicated and difficult. But when I finally said, I'm just going to try to make this as simple and as easy as possible, that was when things really started to happen for me on the weight loss journey. And I've been doing intermittent fasting now really since 2015. That's when I was doing it probably poorly, but still, I lost about 20 pounds that year, but I started regaining. So it's a net loss of about 15 that year. And then, since that time, I've lost 80 pounds and I've kept it off. And all during that time, I've been doing some form of intermittent fasting. And the times when it's gone the best for me has been when I've just kept it as simple as possible. And the times when I've had trouble is when I've just tried to overcomplicate it. And that was 2015. I was just trying to overcomplicate it. So in this podcast, we're just going to start with the basics. So intermittent fasting is simply eating during a certain part of the day and fasting for the rest of the day. Your day, the 24 hours, is broken up into two parts: the eating window and the fasting window. Now, if you're brand new to intermittent fasting, you might hear things like, a 16-8 or an 18-6, and you may wonder, what exactly does that mean? And that's just a way people talk about the fasting window and eating window. So the first number you hear will be the amount of hours that someone is fasting, and the second number will be the eating window that they've allotted for themselves. So for example, if someone says, I'm doing a 16-8, it's written as like the number 16, colon, 8. That means that they are fasting for 16 hours, and then they are eating during an 8-hour window. So first, let's talk about the fasting window, because that's probably going to be the most unfamiliar thing. Everybody knows how to eat, right? But the fasting part can trip people up sometimes. So to fast simply means that you don't eat. And, at bottom, that's how simple it really is. Just don't eat during the fasting window. But there's going to be questions almost immediately. The things that are going to start cropping up in your mind are like, well, when you say no eating, does that mean like no food at all? Like I can't taste the spaghetti sauce that I'm cooking for supper and it's during my fasting window. What do I do then? And there are going to be these things in your mind. So I would offer to you that ultimately you have to decide. And really, that's true with everything on the weight loss journey. You have to decide what your rules are. I like to practice intermittent fasting in a very laid back way. And so in the beginning, I was a little bit more strict with myself on the fasting window in some ways. In some ways, I was still very laid back. But in the beginning, for me, I would do no bites of food at all. None. So I would not taste things that I was, cooking for supper. If it was during my fasting window, I just said, well, I hope it turns out well because I'm not going to take any bites of food. And that was actually, I think, an important thing for me to do in that season. When I was learning how to do intermittent fasting, I needed to kind of build that discipline. But, in the big scheme of things, would that bite of spaghetti sauce hurt anything? No, I don't think so. I think that intermittent fasting mainly works because it just makes it so it's easier to eat the right amount of calories. But what happens all too often is a bite of spaghetti sauce leads to like another bite and another bite, or at least it did for me, and then it's like, well, let's have a little snack, and then you end up eating a lot. So in the beginning, especially I would say that first year when I really got consistent with intermittent fasting, I would not taste food. I would just keep the fasting window for fasting, except I did drink coffee with half and half and sugar. So, and that's, something that really did help me was to have my coffee how I liked it in the fasting window. Now, there are going to be people out there that say, absolutely not. You can't have anything during the fasting window. And I say to them, that's what I needed. And I continue to have my coffee with half and half. I cut out the sugar in 2015. I slowly weaned myself off of it because I had convinced myself that I really have to do this. I don't really know exactly why. I think the main motivation for me there was I thought, well, it'll probably make fasting feel easier if I don't have that sugar. Because I was like, probably if I have sugar in my coffee, it's going to kind of make me hungry. So I cut out the sugar over time, not out of my eating window. I still ate plenty of sugar during my eating window. It was just during the fasting window. I thought I kind of want that to be my rule, that I just have coffee with half and half, and that's all I allow myself. But the big picture thing to get is the fasting window is for fasting, just meaning don't eat. And again, you get to pick your rule to figure out, are you going to allow yourself some coffee? Are you going to allow yourself, diet soda? That's another thing. People, want to have soda of some sort. I would say diet soda, they have no calories. I don't have diet Cokes and stuff because they make my stomach feel weird, and I usually feel really hungry if I have a diet drink. I don't know what that's all about, but it is something that happens to me. So I just have, if I'm going to have soda type things, I do the things like LaCroix, Clear American. It's unsweetened sparkling water that's flavored somehow with essential oils or something like that. But that is the fasting window. Basically, just don't eat. And that's all there is to it. Now, the other part of your day is your eating window. And this is the fun part, right? It's what do I get to eat? Now, the eating window, again, can be as strict or as laid back as you want it to be. I prefer laid back. And what I mean by that is I eat everything. I don't eat low carb. I don't eat keto. I don't eat high protein, especially. I just eat all the food. So, if you wonder what I eat everything. I don't have any kind of specific way I'm eating. I tend to make things from scratch at home. We don't go out to eat that often, but the rule that I made for myself during the eating window was to eat when I'm hungry and stop when I'm full. And my general tactic was to try to eat meals and not so much snacks. That was something that it was not a hard and fast rule for me. I generally just tried to eat a good meal when my window opened up and then let that sustain me until supper time. And then, eat during that time and then maybe have a small snack afterwards. Over time, I cut out snacks because what I saw was that it was tied to emotional eating. When I was getting hungry for snacks, it wasn't really that I was hungry. It was that I was stressed out about something or I was procrastinating on something. And so I just got rid of snacks in general. But ultimately, it's up to you, how you want to structure your day. A lot of people, do it a lot of different ways. You talk to 10 different intermittent fasters. I guarantee you they're going to have 10 different ways they do the eating window. Now, there is one thing I will caution you about, and that is just because there's an eating window, let's say you have an 8-hour eating window, that does not mean that you can just eat for 8 hours straight and not expect that you're going to gain weight. Intermittent fasting is not some sort of magic bullet for weight loss. If you just obey the fasting window and obey the eating window, you're going to like magically lose weight. In my experience, that's not at all how it works. The way it works appears to be that it just makes it easier to eat the right amount of food for your body in order to lose weight if you're trying to lose weight, or to maintain that weight loss if you're just trying to maintain. You can be completely consistent with your eating window and your fasting window. I mean, just be spot on and still gain weight. Because ultimately, if you're eating more food than what your body needs, you will gain weight. The way to lose weight is to eat less food than what your body needs, and you will lose weight. And intermittent fasting, in my experience, makes that a lot easier. To me, trying to spread my calories out over the entire day. My eating pattern before I started intermittent fasting was basically, wake up, have breakfast, then sometime in the mid-morning, have some snacks, and then at lunchtime, eat again. And then in the afternoon, have some snacks, and then have supper. And then after that, more snacks. I mean, that was really what my eating habits were like. And that was a lot of food, basically. But then, as you compress the amount of time that you have to eat, it becomes just easier to eat the right amount. And it becomes harder to eat too much, although it can be done. So let's put that all together. When you're trying to get started with intermittent fasting, you're going to need to kind of pick a window. And I would offer the best way to do this is to kind of have a goal in mind and then slowly work your way up to that. So right now, if basically you're doing what I used to do, which was wake up, eat, and snack throughout the day, and then eat some more and then snack, just start out with something very easy. So for example, cut off your eating at a certain time each night and make it so that you don't eat your breakfast until a certain time each morning. For me, that first little fasting window was from about 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. And that was 8 hours. I was basically sleeping through it. But it was just a matter of getting a window going. So that's the first step, is just to figure out, okay, what can that first window be? Maybe your first window can be longer than that. I don't know what your specific situation is, but just figure out, what could I say is my first fasting window? So that's the food. I just will not eat food during that time. And then maybe you want to set a goal for something like a 16-8. That's generally speaking when people tend to have results. I think that makes sense because, an 8-hour window that's a pretty compressed amount of time. If you're used to eating, all day into late at night, then compressing it down really does help. Some people, though, they do better with an 18-6. Some people do better with a 24. Some people, like myself, do the best with OMAD, which is just one meal a day. It's like a 24-hour fast every day. But ultimately, you just have to find what works for you. But a good first goal is something like a 16-8. And so when you are working your way up to that window, just be aware that you're probably not going to lose any weight at all. Maybe you'll lose a little bit. It really depends on where you're at as far as, how much is your eating changed just by even having a shorter window. And think of intermittent fasting more as a skill, because it does take time to learn how to fast consistently. You're probably going to be bad at it at first. You're probably going to overcomplicate it. And so there's going to be, some times where you're just making things too hard on yourself. But over time, you'll get better at intermittent fasting. You'll get more disciplined with eating during your eating window and fasting during your fasting window. And over time, that window can get long enough so that you can have results. So that's how you get started with intermittent fasting. You just split your day up into the eating window and the fasting window. And then you just focus on, how much you're eating during the eating window. And if the scale's not moving, you just need to figure out a way to eat less, move more, eat less, but mainly eat less. Because, when you start to move more and really focus on that, a lot of times you just get hungrier. So it can become this kind of losing battle because you're just getting hungry and hungrier, making things more difficult. Instead, just focus on how can you eat less food. And, there's several ways to do that. Things like, making the eating window shorter can make that easier. Things like just cutting out snacking can also help too. And one thing that really helped me was to really start to focus on filling my life up with things other than food, really getting back into doing things that you like to do, things that are not related to food, things like maybe drawing and writing and, work even, or doing housework, getting your house cleaned up, that kind of thing. All those things can help you to eat the right amount of food. And when you're starting out, remember, it's okay to go slow. In fact, I'd highly recommend that you go a little bit slower than you think you need to, just so that you can begin to build that skill and get good at intermittent fasting. And over time, you will lose the weight. It just takes time and patience. So thank you for joining me in this episode, and I'll see you in the next one. Do you want to lose the weight without getting rid of the foods you love and that you'll go back to eating again anyway? My book, The Laid Back Guide to Intermittent Fasting, teaches you how to practice intermittent fasting so that you lose the weight sustainably and keep it off for good. You can get the audiobook read by me for free when you sign up for your 30-day trial of Audible. The link is in the show notes. And if you've gotten value from this podcast and you'd like to let other people know about it, it'd be great if you could leave a review on either iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. Thanks.